My family. Just a few announcements before we dive in. This upcoming Wednesday, or it's not even Wednesday, this upcoming Tuesday is going to be our midweek service. It's going to be for the men. It's Tuesday because it's Thanksgiving, so please do plan accordingly. And then just a couple thank yous. First, wherever Bill Throne is, Bill, raise your hand. Oh, there's Bill. Come here, Bill. If we can give Bill a huge, huge round of applause. Them and the rest of the worship team did an incredible job with Jesus and music. It was super, super special. It was awesome seeing the kids dance around and go crazy. So, guys, thank you so much. That was really awesome. I was actually talking to Corey Stuck about it, and I think we're going to try to make it an all-church thing sometime next year, which could be really, really special. Also, the YoPros and the campus, we had a Friendsgiving at the Rondor's house 2 Saturdays ago, and it was just killer. The food was amazing. The worship was sweet. We had like 50-plus people in the Rondor's house, and I don't think anything broke, which is a miracle. And then last but not least, just some good news from the campus ministry. You guys don't get to interact much with the disciples that are up on the peninsula, the campus disciples that are up on the peninsula. But the HU students, what God is doing at Hampton University, it really is really remarkable. There's just a lot of people up there studying the Bible. But last Sunday, we have our Bible Talk Sunday afternoon. And last Sunday, we had 28 friends at Bible Talk. There's 3 disciples at Hampton University, and there's 28 friends. And we had a Bible Talk about sin. It was about Galatians 5, and but it was. Bruce said it was encouraging. It really was. Like the conversations, the vulnerability, the conversations that happened afterwards, the Bible studies that started afterwards. It was really, really awesome. So it's really special to see kind of what God is doing. Go ahead and bow with me. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this chance to gather as a family, to come before you, God, to throw off the distractions and the things that are pulling at our hearts and our mind, especially during often a busy holiday season, and just to be still and stop and be present and come before you and your Son and hopefully be really filled and led by your Holy Spirit. God, I do pray that you would lavish us with grace as we dive into your word. God, help us to have ears that hear, hearts that are soft, minds that are changed. And Father, I pray for those of us in this room, for those that interact with us online, that you would continue to mature us into the image of your Son individually, but even so much more collectively. God, please, please, please allow your words to change us this morning. It's in Christ's name. Amen. Turn your Bibles over to Daniel chapter 10, please. As a church, we've been marching our way through the book of Daniel, and today we're actually going to finish the book of Daniel. We're going to go Daniel's 10, 11, and 12. We won't read all the text. There's too many squirrel moments if we were to do that. But we are going to kind of dive into Daniel 10, 11, and 12. But in order to preface it, I want to share, or I want to play a bit of a game with you guys. Has anybody ever seen the movie or the TV show This Is Us? Yeah, a handful of us, right? We probably watched a lot of it during COVID because we watched too much TV during COVID. But in the TV show This Is Us, there's a married couple named Beth and Randall. And Randall struggles with anxiety or some level of depression. And so him and his wife, they play this game called the worst case scenario game. And Randall gets overwhelmed, and him and his wife, they just banter back and forth. Okay, what's the worst thing that could actually happen? And I remember seeing this, and I did it with myself in my own faith when I was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Right? Things weren't necessarily going how we wanted. We were church plants. We didn't have a lot of money financially. And so I played this game of worst case scenario. And basically, worst case scenario was the church fell apart, and nothing was left, but I still had my wife, and I still had Jesus. And I was like, man, it could be a whole lot worse. And so in preparation this morning, I played this game again with myself, but it was a little bit bleaker. And this is what I played. Worst case scenario for Jimmy Black. Worst case scenario is we go into World War III. Universities shut down, and they start drafting college students into the war. I get fired and I lose my job because money is tight, and the church has to make some cuts. I start trying to find a job, but I'm unable to because my engineering degree from 10 years ago is worthless now. And so I sell my golf clubs. Yeah. I sell my woodworking equipment. I sell my lifting stuff. But we can't make ends meet, and eventually we foreclose on our house. And we have to move away from beloved Hampton roads and off of the water. But I got fired from the church, mind you, so I can't move back in with my father-in-law, who's an elder, because he just fired me. I've got a lot of feelings towards him. So my wife and I, we decided to move back to Chagrin Falls, Ohio, into my parents' 2-bedroom house. It ain't so. With 2 little kids going berserk. Right? This is like, it's kind of bleak, but it's kind of funny. But here's where it starts to get real. My wife gets overwhelmed. She gets frustrated with me. She gets frustrated with God. And this is my worst case scenario, right? And she leaves God. And then she leaves me. And she takes the kids and she moves who knows where. And I'm left as, this is going to take some time. I turned 34 in February. I'm left as a 34-year-old man, alone with my parents who I love, but I don't want to live at home, with no job, friends that are leaving God, friends who are dying in a war, and I'm left there thinking, man, God, is this it? What I just described is my worst case scenario. Some of you have gone through these things. Some of you have lost spouses. Some of you, your children have turned on you. Some of you, your parents have turned on you. Many of you have seen war and seen terrible atrocities. Many of us will see these things. I've lived a rather special life thus far. But there's nuggets in my worst case scenario that you have endured or you are enduring. What we're going to see here in Daniel chapter 10, 11, and 12, it's the worst case scenario. It's a vision that cripples Daniel. Tony did a great job last week preaching through Daniel chapter 9 and showing us Daniel's heart, that Daniel's a bit dumbfounded, maybe a bit frustrated, like, man, God, where are you? It's been 70 years. I've been faithful to you. Why aren't you coming back? And the answer is Jesus eventually. But here the vision gets even bleaker. So we're going to dive in. Daniel chapter 10. Worst case scenario. Starting in verse 1. And hopefully you have your Bibles. We're going to jump around a bit. And I do encourage you, be Brian Jew after this sermon. Go back, read the text. We don't have the time to cover everything. We'd be in here for a really long time, and I'm sure you don't want that. So we're going to be Daniel chapter 10, starting verse 1 to verse 3. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation or a vision, an uncovering was given to Daniel. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of this message came to him in a vision. At the time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no wine or no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotion at all until the 3 weeks were over. And so this vision that Daniel has, it overwhelms him, so much so that it causes him to do some form of fasting and to withhold lotion, and we don't really know why, but we know that the lotion would have been significant to his hygiene and significant to his appearance. But he decides to forego all of it because he's overwhelmed by what he's seeing. And the rest of Daniel chapter 10, there's going to be this heavenly being that appears to Daniel, and he's basically attempting to comfort, encourage, strengthen, and inspire Daniel to remain faithful. There's this back and forth, and there's this questioning that goes on. And he's basically pleading with Daniel, hang in there. Right? Just be strong, Daniel. And he's going to touch him, and he's going to give him the strength to stand up. And then we're going to continue down in verse 20. So this heavenly being, this angelic being, and we really have no idea who it is. Some people speculate it's Gabriel, the archangel. Some people are like, oh, maybe this is Jesus. We just don't know who it is. But we know it's this heavenly being interacting with Daniel on earth. It's the heaven and earth colliding here. Do you know why I've come to you? Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. When I go, the prince of Greece will come. We've heard this stuff. The Medo-Persian Empire, the Greece Empire. We've heard all this in our Daniel series. Verse 21. But first, I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. All these things are true. All these things are going to happen. No one supports me against them except Michael, your prince. That's why people think it's Gabriel. And in the first year, Darius the Mede, I took my stand to support and protect him. Chapter 11, verse 1. Now then, I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will arise in Persia, then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king will arise, who will rule with great power and do as he pleases. After he has arisen, his empire will be broken and parceled out towards the 4 winds of heaven. We've heard all of this before. This is very similar to Daniel's vision in chapter 8. It will not go to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others. Go ahead, next couple slides for me. So Daniel, this vision isn't new so far, at least what we've seen. This vision walks really closely in line with Daniel chapter 8. He has this vision that there's this empire, the Persian Empire. We know it's the Medo-Persian Empire, them kind of coming together. And there's going to be this prince that rules over them, this empire. But then comes who to conquer them? He gave it away. Well, it's Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great's going to come in, great power. But then what happens to Alexander the Great's successors? Does anybody remember? It's split up into 4 different empires, right? The 4 winds of heaven. Right? And eventually, out of one of those empires is going to come this ruthless leader called Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Right? And he's going to desolate the Jewish people. He's going to ravage the temple, right? He's going to desecrate everything about their culture. He's going to get rid of circumcision and set up foreign gods in the temple. And it's gross, and it's ugly, and it's brutal. And that's basically going to be the first, maybe half or first quarter of Daniel chapter 11. But then the vision of Daniel chapter 11 continues, right? And this is where the worst case scenario starts to come into play. And as this vision continues, we're going to skip down to verse 28 in chapter 11. There's going to be this king of the north. Verse 28, the king of the north will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against what? The Holy Covenant, the Old Covenant, the Mosaic, the Davidic, the Noahic covenants. He'll take action against it and then return to his own country. So there's this northern king, right, that's kind of past Antiochus Epiphanes. Some people think it might still be Antiochus Epiphanes, but the details don't actually add up. Verse 28, at the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Ships of the western coastlands will oppose him. He will lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his fury against, again, the Holy Covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. So there's this king of the north that's set on opposing the Holy Covenant. And he's going to uplift anybody who forsakes the Holy Covenant. Verse 31. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. And then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant, and the people who know their God will firmly resist him. So there's this war going on between this king of the north and the holy covenant of God. The covenant that Abraham's going to be the father of many nations. The covenant that God's going to set his bow in the sky and point his wrath away from humanity. The covenant that David's going to be a king whose descendant sits on the throne forever. This empire, this king of the north, is setting himself in opposition to this covenant. Those who are wise, verse 33. Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword and be burned or captured or plundered. When they fall, they will receive a little help, and many who are not sincere will join them. Some of the wise will stumble, so that they may be refined and purified and made spotless until the time of the end, for it will still come at the appointed time. The king, verse 36, the king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. It's like horrible, this vision. And mind you, what has Daniel's life been up to this point? Daniel's life up to this point has been, Yahweh's faithful. As long as I'm faithful to Yahweh, Yahweh will be faithful to me. Think Daniel chapter 1. He refuses to defile himself with the royal food. And here comes God, not only to spare him, but to make him more wise and successful than anyone else in the Babylonian Empire, to bring him to great heights within the Babylonian kingdom. Right? And then we've got the three friends, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, that are thrown into the fiery furnace. But here comes God, rescuing them from the fiery furnace. And then another kingdom comes in place, and new decrees are set up, and Daniel continues to worship his God, and then he's thrown where? Into the lion's den. But in comes Yahweh again to rescue Daniel. We see God's faithfulness again and again and again in the book of Daniel. Like the theme of the book of Daniel is, do not fear, God's in control. But here, this God who's in control, the vision that he's given them is awful. The faithful are going to be slaughtered. They're going to be taken captured. Some probably raped. Right? It is like awful. This picture that's painting. That's why Daniel's zapped of his strength. He's like, wait, none of this makes sense. What happened to the blessings and curses of if I'm faithful to Moses' covenant that I'll receive blessings, and if I'm not faithful, curses, right? You're talking about the wise God. Yahweh, you're talking about the righteous, and man, they're going to be killed. Like, it is the worst case scenario, and it leaves us with this massive question, man, why even follow God? If this is going to be the outcome of the faithful Israelites, why pledge our allegiance to this king at all? Skip down to verse 44. But reports from the east and the north will alarm him. That's alarm the king of the north. He will set out in great rage to destroy and annihilate many. He will pitch his tent, royal tents, between the seas and the holy nation, or the beautiful holy mountain, right? He's going to set himself against the nation of Israel. Yet he will come to an end, and no one will help him. Verse 1 of chapter 12. At that time, Michael, the archangel, the great prince who protects your people, he's going to arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of the nations until then. We're going to pause. So there's a glimmer of hope here. All this is going to come to an end, but it still begs the question, but what about the generations before? It doesn't seem worth it. Why on earth would I ever pledge my allegiance to Yahweh if he just said, man, even if you're faithful to me, you're going to be killed? Why should you and I, as followers of Jesus, ever pledge our allegiance to Jesus if we know that the road is narrow? Right? If we know that, all right, following Jesus is going to make my life harder, why should I ever follow Jesus? So it even brings this like massive question of how can a good God allow sin to reign and cause massive destruction in our lives. Or it brings into questions, right? A good God, a sovereign God, allowing slavery for generations of people that were simply born into it. How a good God could allow World War II and the mass execution of innocent men, women, and children. It brings this massive question of the problem of sin. And how is God going to deal with this problem of sin? Are you with me? This is bringing Daniel chapter 12 to this climax. Yes, God is faithful. God is in control. Do not fear. Pledge your allegiance to him. But what about all this suffering? What about the children that are killed? What about the children whose innocence is stripped of them because of evil? Evil of family members. Evil of foreigners. Like, why do this God thing? Why not protect myself? Why not be like the Babylonian Empire to protect my kingdom, protect my family, set ourselves up against other people, and even if I have to step on somebody, at least my loved ones are protected? Why not pledge our allegiance to ourselves and our kingdom and our people groups and our bodies? Why? Why trust God? This is where it gets so cool. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found in the book. Let's read that again. But at that time, your people, the faithful Jews, the wise, the righteous, at that time, everyone whose name is written in the book will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of heaven, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go from here and there to increase in knowledge. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river, the other on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, that's a reference back to Daniel chapter 10, who is above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are to be fulfilled? The man clothed in linen, who is above the waters of the river, lifted his hands, his right hand and his left hand towards the skies or the heaven. I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be a time and times and half a time, when the power of the holy people who has been finally broken, and all these things will be completed. I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked again, my Lord, what will be the outcome of all this? The man, he said again to Daniel, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the end time. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. From that time, the daily sacrifice is abolished, and the abomination that causes desolation is set up. There will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the man who waits for and reaches the end of 1,335 days. By the way, we really don't know what those things reference, and that's okay. As for you, Daniel, go your way to the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the day of your days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. Why should the Jews be faithful? Why should the Israelites be faithful? Why should you and I ever be faithful if life's going to be harder? If our worst case scenario might happen? There's many people in this room that were married as Christians that are no longer married to that Christian. Why? Why go down this hard path of maybe having your children reject you or being ostracized and ridiculed and mocked at in high school or being outcast in college? Why go down this path at all? Because the resurrection is promised. This is the only passage in our Old Testament that talks explicitly about our resurrection. It's the only passage. There's other passages, maybe in Psalms, that certainly allude to it, but it's the only one that's explicitly about the resurrection of God's people. Why? Why be faithful? Because this is not the end. This isn't the end. Justice and judgment is not just now. There's going to come a time when the creator of the universe will sit down and judge his creation. And that should do two things. That should cause us to tremble in fear, but shout in joy. Church, we thirst for justice. We do. Like, we see the wickedness that rages around us, and we desperately desire justice. But if you want justice on this earth, you're going to wait a long, long, long time. As a matter of fact, you're probably not going to get it. You're not. The final justice is going to come when the creator of heaven comes to judge his creation. But there's a huge part of that should cause us to tremble, yes? I talked about this king of the north living in opposition to God's kingdom, to the Jews and the Israelites, and setting themselves up against God. Ironically, what does the book of Romans call you and I? Enemies of God. You guys, we're not far from the beast of the north. We're not. We're not far from like ruthless annihilation of people. If you sit down with me and you hear my story, that was my life. I used people. I manipulated people. I ran through people just to satisfy temporary desires that only left me craving more. Like we live as enemies to the cross. Like God is coming and, man, he's going to judge us. Like, yes, the gospel of Jesus is good news, and we're going to get to the good news, I promise. But we've got to be careful not to allow our arrogance to blind us. Right? We're not far from King David, the man after God's own heart, who takes a woman who's not his own to be his own, impregnates her, then kills her husband to protect his little kingdom. We're not far from Abraham lying about who our spouse is, cowarding to protect our small empire. We're not far from that. Actually, we are that. And here is God, man, he's going to judge the wicked. And yes, we shout with joy for justice, but then we tremble over our sin. Right? If you're here this morning, you're like, man, I'm not ready for the resurrection. You're in good company. Every single one of us without Jesus live as enemies of the cross. Every single one of us without Jesus live in opposition to Yahweh. Like, you are in good company. But then our hearts begin to leap as we think about the resurrection. As we think about the possibility to being taken back to the Garden of Eden, being amongst God's creation, those who love and worship him and walk with him and walking with him in the streets of gold, whatever on earth that might mean. Right? We do start to leap at this. And I wanted to share something about this, because I really do struggle with living my life in view of eternity. I wore my glasses this morning on purpose. I actually need my glasses. These aren't fake. That's why it looks like I have like Coke bottles for eyes right now. But this is how blind I am, right? I can't really see the screen. I see there's a little bit of gold. I made the slide, so I know what it says, and I just had my glasses on. But I can't really see it. And for so much of my life, even as a Christian, I can live very nearsighted. I can live really focused on the temporary things that are in front of me. And you know what it does? It steals all the clarity in my life. It steals my joy and my peace and my hope. And I can't see anything clearly. But the moment I start living in light of eternity, everything makes sense. The problem of sin makes sense. My own sin makes sense. But the cross jumps off the page and no longer becomes a story that we tell children like an old wives' tale. But it's incredibly real. The wrath of God pointed back at God so that the people of God can be with God. It's the cloud rider of Daniel 7, not just coming to take his throne on a really gushy chair, but it's the cloud rider of Daniel 7 coming to usher in his kingdom on a cross. I had the privilege to do a Bible study this week with an ODU student. And we studied out the cross. And it was the first time he ever really studied out the cross. And you could see the scales fall from his eyes. You could see his heart soften as he realized, look at what God did for me. I'm Barnabas. I'm the one that the crowd shouted, release him. Right? Many of you joke with my whole Jimmy chant, right? The crowd is literally chanting, we want Jimmy. The womanizer, the arrogant, the drunk, the coward, the insecure. We want him. You can take Jesus. And here's Jesus taking our place in the courtroom, taking our place on that judgment seat. So we no longer have to be the beast of the north, but we can be the wise and the faithful and the righteous with God. Church, Daniel chapter 12, it's simply pointing forward to the gospel, the good news of Jesus. That Jesus is going to come and die for humanity, die for you, die for me, to raise us to new life. Yes, new life here on earth, but even more so, new life in heaven and the new earth with him. And we as a church, we've got to put our glasses on. We've got to stop living so nearsighted. If we really lived in view of eternity, it would take a lot for you to be offended. It would. Things would bounce off you all the time because you're like, my reward's in heaven. Do it again. But there's something else really cool here. Go to the Daniel 12 passage for me. Those who live in view of eternity, right? Those who live with their eyes fixated on, man, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm going to be with God forever. This is the life they live. It's the only thing that makes sense. It's the only way 1 + 1 = 2 when it comes to spirituality. The only way that you and I live in view of eternity is we live as the wise, helping other people get to eternity. Church, it's the only thing that makes sense. And it's the only reason why Daniel would have tried to help more people become Israelites. Like Daniel's got this wicked vision that, man, you're all going to suffer. Well, why would he want to bring anybody to this suffering? Like, why should you and I go and share our faith and sit down and do a discipleship study with somebody and say, oh, yeah, hey, if you want to follow Jesus, you're going to walk on this really, really narrow road that's harder than really anything I can describe. And it's actually it's a whole lot harder than anything you're ever going to imagine, even though you think you know what it's going to be like. And it's so hard that you're going to die for your faith. That's what it means to carry your cross. Do you want to come follow it with me? It's illogical. Unless heaven's real. unless our resurrection is real. Church, we get to shine like stars forever. But does this not radically alter how we live our lives this holiday season? Like, no longer this holiday season are we so focused on the things that we're going to get. Like, we're focused on, man, when I go visit my family, how can I shine like the stars with them? How can I serve them? How can I speak the truth to them? How can I invite them to come follow Jesus with me? Right? When we're at the grocery store, when we're at the gas station, we're just consumed with putting our glasses on and, man, I want to help you live life in view of eternity. And the thing that's so special is when we invite people to live in view of eternity and we bring them into this family, church, this is a taste of heaven. This room is a taste of heaven. It really is. Like, my wife and I gush about the Hampton Roads Church. We do. Like, the relationships that we get to have in this room, it fills our soul. To be able to bring my son to a bar on a Wednesday night and see a bunch of people go loco without any Four Loko. I only hit the millennials with that joke. Like, to see a group of people worship in a way without shame, without any inhibition, without any substance. And then to see my son dancing with Callie and Svenna and getting tackled by who knows who in the stage and then laughing. I'm like, man, this is a slice of heaven on earth. Right? Sitting down with campus students and sharing our souls with one another. We had a D group about 2 weeks ago, and there was like deep things that people were vulnerable about. And to be able to see like each other spiritually naked, not physically naked, but spiritually naked, like to know each other rawly and fully and yet still love one another. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is heaven on earth. But you know what did it for me as a non-Christian? It was the diversity. I grew up in white suburbia, USA. If you were to look at like a cutout of our high school, it's like a little bit of a circle, and then there's like this cutout of districting in our high school. And that cutout, it was all the minorities. Like my high school, it was 99% Caucasian. I went to the University of Kentucky, which is a lot of white people again. And guess what? Those were all my friends. I studied the Bible, right? I started getting invited into people's home. I remember the first time I walked into somebody's home that didn't look like me. And I felt uncomfortable. I did. It smelled different. It looked different. There's different things on the wall. There were different foods we were going to eat. It was just different. But there's something in me that leapt. And then the worship songs, the diversity of the worship songs. And it was a year after I got baptized. It was a year after I got baptized. I was sitting in a Roosters wing place with some brothers. We were having a D group. And we were talking about our relations. And it hit me. I was like, I never had a single friend who was a minority until after I became a Christian. But they weren't just my friends. They were my brothers. This is my family. Church, this is heaven on earth. We get to taste just a small bit of what the resurrection's going to be like. And my plea with Christians, for those that have been baptized for the forgiveness of their sins, who have been raised to new life in Jesus, man, live in view of eternity. Live with your eyes fixated on heaven, on the judgment and the justice that our God is going to bring on all of creation, but the newness of life that we get to look forward to as we're raised with Jesus. But for those that aren't Christians, I know that you have lots of questions about the Bible, about Jesus, and about your own life. And what's so cool about this story in Daniel is Daniel still didn't quite understand. God says, man, it's all going to happen. Daniel's like, all right, when? And then he basically kind of dodges the question, and then he's like, well, when? He's like, don't worry about it. Just continue on what you're going to do. You're going to enter rest, then you're going to receive your inheritance. So what does this mean for you? Go to John chapter 17. So, and I should have referenced this in Daniel chapter 12, but in Daniel 12, he's given this vision, he's given this truth, he's given the reality of the resurrection and the judgment day, right? And then he said, okay, seal up these words until the appointed time, right? Seal up my words, right? And those words, they're always intended to give God's people faith for every generation to come, not just the Israelites and the Jews, but the Christians today, right? The words of Daniel are written to show us the faithfulness of God so we can pledge our fidelity back to God. That's the book of Daniel in a nutshell. Do not fear. God is faithful. Pledge your fidelity back to him. What does this mean for you, the non-Christian, you that's wrestling with your faith? Jesus answered, my teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me. It comes from Yahweh. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. My plea with you is give God, give Jesus, and give the Bible a chance, a genuine chance. Sit down, look at the scriptures. In the same way that I looked at the cross with somebody this past week, ask somebody, say, hey, would you study out the cross with me? But do it in a way that you're like, hey, I just want to figure out if this Jesus thing is real. Like if this resurrected life, if this thing is actually real. And I promise you, I'll bet my life on it. If you seek, you will find. If you knock, the door will be open. And if you ask, he will answer. It's simple. Church, let's just live in view of eternity. To stop living so nearsighted, focused on the here and now, but to live not for the next 10 years, but for the next 10,000 years as we look forward to the new heaven and the new earth with our Creator who loves us immeasurably more than we could ever ask or imagine. Thank you all so much.